are back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday. We're talking about the after effects of the Texas shooting, the Muslim community, the questions about this art exhibit and how it all played out. With us is Paul Galloway. He's the Executive Director of the American Muslim Advisory Council. Professor Larry Burriss, Journalism Professor over at MTSU. Thanks both for coming on. Real quickly, before we get to the phone lines, and we've got them open with some folks on hold, but just, Paul, for you, and it's a basic question that maybe just folks who don't follow this real closely want to know. Okay, well, heck, if I draw something or somehow do something with regard to the Prophet Muhammad, or, you know, a school newspaper puts it on their front page to kind of examine the issue, and there are folks within the Muslim community that see this, what is the reaction? Will they be offended, and do you have to worry about getting shot?
You know, so I really am glad that you gave me an opportunity to talk about this, because the Muslim community, I very often say that we get presented like a Star Trek New Generation type of thing. It's like we're thought of as the Borg, right? That we're a monolithic group that just has one response that's universal across it. In Nashville alone, we have over 40 different ethnic groups. Our community is so diverse. We have people that are politically conservative, people that are politically liberal, that just spans from business owners to refugees, right? And from, you know, PhDs that are professors down to people without a high school degree. And you can't say that one person or one response is going to be the Muslim community's response. You know, it's such a diverse community that there's going to be a plethora of responses.
Can you explain why they take such offense to a depiction of the Prophet?
So, it really depends on what branch of Islam you follow.
So it's not across the board?
In the Shia tradition, which is kind of like the Catholics of Islam, and the Sunnis would be more like the Protestants, by way of kind of hierarchy, because the Shia tradition has a kind of a different hierarchy structure for their imams. There's actually a tradition of drawing the Prophet Muhammad. You know, the U.S. Supreme Court has a statue of the Prophet Muhammad in there as people who are luminaries of justice. There's actually a statue at the Supreme Court. Nobody's taking offense to that because it was done respectfully. Now, one of the issues is that Islam overall kind of went the way that the Byzantine Empire originally did, and they don't do iconography or they don't do images. You know, the Bible says, you know, no graven images, because it could be for idolatry. And the birth of Islam was in a place where paganism and idolatry was rampant. So it's kind of a theological part from one side, and then the other part is that a lot of the scholars have said that we don't depict our prophet because we don't want any race to feel not included in his leadership or in following him. Because if you depict him as an Arab or you depict him as black hair, all of a sudden what does that do to blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, or what does it do to black people? So a lot of the thing about Islam and depictions, some of it comes to theology, some of it comes to practicality, but I think the offense comes is when it's done in a way that's slandering our symbols. It's trying to make Muslims feel less welcome and less respected than other religions. Okay.
Professor, you said during the break when we talked about it, should the campus newspaper do this, they have to be prepared to deal with the consequences.
Right. Freedom of speech is freedom with responsibility, and if you're going to do speech, then you must be willing to take the consequences. And if people want to protest and demonstrate and march, if somebody wants to try to defund the paper, for example, well, that's a government entity there. It's government funding with state funding with the paper. But again, I would tell people how to protest in a movie theater. I would talk to the theater owner about how to show a movie, and then I would tell the anti-movie people how to protest, demonstrate, to fight it off. As you were saying earlier, more speech, not less speech, is the answer. We need to have more dialogue, and that dialogue may get vitriolic at times. We may have inflamed passions at times, but I think we can still sit down or maybe stand up and yell at each other. That's fine. When you start crossing the line to action, though, that's a problem.
And do you think some of these recent incidents have had a chilling effect? I mean, I don't know. I mean, most journalists do and stick by their tenets to do what's right. But even if I was in a situation like this, I would think twice before, even if it contributed to the article, depicting it in a way that
which is self-censorship, which is not a good thing.
Exactly, it's not. But I'm not saying that I wouldn't run it, but I can tell you right now, I think you're a fool if you don't think twice. Now, I hope you follow the right tenets, but I would think twice. And I can tell you, there's certainly some people out there that don't want to bother with it, and they're not going to do it.
A lot of it depends on your perspective. If we go all the way back to the Revolutionary War, Paul Revere and John Adams were saying to people, the police are coming to your town, get your guns out and shoot them. That's what Lexington and Concord were all about. And we sort of praise them. Well, you know, it's a different perspective, so we need to allow all the groups to have their perspective. We need to learn what that perspective is. As you were saying, there's a lot of misunderstanding out there.
Yeah.
So we need to have that dialogue. We need to explain, you know, when we talk about the news people, there are people in Nashville I think you would rather not be, news people you'd rather not be associated with. But what is the news person? What is the faith community? They're all a whole wide range in there. So it's wrong to say this is the Catholic community,
right,
or this is the Republican community, or we have a spokesperson for the white community or the black community. What if I don't want that spokesperson?
Yeah.
Okay, then we need all the dialogue there.
Yeah, diversity. Did you want to say something, Paul?
No.
Okay, let's take a phone call or two. Let's go to Joe. Joe, good morning.
Good morning, Nick.
Hey, Joe.
Seems like both the two gentlemen you have on this morning are very level-headed, and I don't know that much about the Muslim religion, but I'm listening to the gentleman and I'm learning more than I knew. But this lady, you know, I'm all for freedom of speech, but it'd be like standing around a fire and inviting a bunch of people around with gasoline cans. It could get out of hand real easy, and everybody should have known this. And if these two guys was on the radar for FBI for being kind of radical on their side, then, you know, this is just going to inflame the people. You know, I don't think, I wouldn't make fun of anybody's religion. Muhammad, drawing a cartoon of it or whatever, but some people might. But when you do that, you need to expect what could follow. I mean, somebody could be very well offended by standing by watching this. So this, you know, you got to be careful about what you do and say nowadays, and you know, it's just everybody. You know, every religion has their right to do what they, you know, see to do, but don't try to inflame something that's already the big issue overseas, and if they keep going, could get to be a big issue here.
Yeah. I mean, well, again, that I don't know if he's leaning toward then. You said earlier, Professor, clearly they knew this could be an issue. That's why they brought in more security. You say it's the government's role to say, look, we have to accept and allow this free speech, just like how we have Klan rallies sometimes. It's been a long time, thankfully, but there's extra security out there to ensure that they're allowed to march and spew their hate, but they're allowed to, and there's law enforcement out there to protect both sides, right?
The part of the problem, though, is as we're tracking those two people, for example, how did the FBI find out about them? They're monitoring phone calls. This is a whole other topic, obviously.
Yeah, sure.
Do we want the security services, the FBI or whoever, monitoring everybody's phone call on the chance that one of the people they catch may have some harm in mind? There are ways of protecting the speech. We can put a police cordon around. Do we want police visiting every rally and demonstration and event here in Nashville? I don't think so. So where's that line between protecting and going too far?
Yeah, it is true. It's incredible, and you can go back to the horrible bombings of the World Trade Towers. How quickly Americans who love our freedoms are willing to give up their civil liberties when they're scared.
Sure.
And let's just talk about the Patriot Act, shall we? I mean, that's my take on it. I mean, you're too quick sometimes to just say we'll trade our civil liberties and our privacy for security. And when you start going down that path, it's a problem, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And, let's go next to Donnie. Hi, Donnie.
Hello.
Good morning, Donnie. What's on your mind?
I got a question. It may not be right or may be wrong. I don't know.
Sure.
But, I mean, they shouldn't kill anybody just for what they draw. And these ISIS people, they got on these online computers. I think if you're online to computer with ISIS or anything like that, the police need to check them out thoroughly and stop them before they start.
Yeah. Well, talk a little bit, if you would, then, Paul, about ISIS and you know the role they play, because we hear about some of these radicalized Muslims in this country that then all of a sudden start making contact with this group.
Right.
And it scares people.
You know, so I'd like to actually start by saying I personally don't call them ISIS because I don't think they're Islamic. and they call themselves Islamic State. Actually, the Arab world calls them Daesh, which means people of destruction. And it sounds like ISIS in Arabic, Daesh. And it's a slander for them. And they've been rejected in almost every way. They've been rejected from the top scholars of Islam, universally all the way down. And what's interesting is they've actually put a hit on a local, and he's actually one of America's most influential scholars. He's a Rhodes teacher. His name is Yasser Qadhi. He lives in Memphis. And he's got a Yale PhD in Islamic Studies. And he's been so outspoken against Daesh, against these terrorists, that they actually, in their last magazine, put his picture and said it's an act of worship to kill him. And this made big news last month, actually. And so this shows where the American Muslim community, by and large, is when it comes to this issue of these terrorists. In fact, our prophet warned us about people. There's an Arabic word called Khawarij, and it means basically extremists. And he said that the people like this, the Khawarij, that they're the dogs of the hellfire. And when he described them, he said outwardly they look religious. They have long beards, they wear thobes, but when they recite the Quran or holy book, that it doesn't go past their throat. And what that means is that they don't grasp the meaning of it. There's no heart in it. It's just that they're using the religion for their own ends.
And what are their ends? What is it they really want?
When I look at ISIS or Daesh, when you look at them, you know, they're doing all sorts of things that just go 100% against Islam. Not alone just the terrorism, the massacres, the persecution, destroying, you know, historical artifacts. They actually sell drugs. They trade in all these things that are just no faith community would ever embrace. And it seems to me that they are pretty much a power-hungry cult trying to establish not just a state, but a domination over people. They kill as many Muslims, if not more Muslims, than anybody else. And if you don't declare allegiance to them, if I was there in the Middle East, in their area, they would murder me in a second, because if I called them Daesh, that was enough right there for me to be gone.
All right, on that note, we'll take a break. The number is 737-7587. If you want to jump in, questions or comments this morning as we talk about spanning from the Texas shooting, some of the fallout, and as you've heard here in our conversation to this point, the media's role, which we're going to get more into in the coverage of this, as well as questions you may have on the Muslim community and their reaction to all this, especially locally here, where we have many of them living among us. So let's take a break and be back with more right after this. Stay with us.